Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we can meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the horrifying murder of 17-year-old Georgia Williams. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week and I'd love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us, one of us, one of us. Alright, now that I'm done begging you to join my cult, we can go ahead and get into this video. This video is on a case that I actually learned about from a member of the Brat Pack, a subscriber named Sarah. And Sarah has an Instagram page that I follow. I'll put it up on the screen here. It's angels_XOXOX. And she posts these little photos, like I'll show you, obviously, it's on the screen. I'm not looking at it now, but I know what it looks like because I've seen it because I follow it. And she puts these photos and she puts synopsises of what happened to people, and that's how I found Georgia's case. I saw her post on Georgia. I read her synopsis on what happened to Georgia, and it stuck with me. Georgia stuck with me, so I wanted to look into the case, and I did. And wow. What all I can say is like, wow. It is absolute nightmare fuel. What happened to Georgia is horrifying, and it happened at the hands of somebody who she extended kindness to that didn't deserve it, and somebody who the police had several run-ins with. It was very clear that this person was a ticking time bomb, and yet all of the agencies that had contact with this person failed to do anything, and if they had done something, Georgia would probably still be alive today. So today I'm going to tell you the entire story. I read all the things so that you do not have to. Once we get to the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details, but obviously I want you to answer when you have some information to go on. But the question of the day is this. What do you think should have been done early on in Georgia's killer's criminal career to avoid something like this happening? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments below after we go through the details of this case. And now with all of that said, come gather round and let me tell you the story of the horrifying murder of 17-year-old Georgia Williams. On May 26, 2017, 17-year-old Georgia Williams left her family's house, which was in Wellington, which is in England, with plans to just walk a couple of minutes down the street to go over to a friend's house. Basically, she and a couple of her girlfriends were heading over to this friend's house to participate in like a photo shoot. So basically, this friend wanted to be a photographer. And so they were going over to do a little bit of modeling, take a little photos to help this person build up their portfolio. Georgia was very beautiful and she'd done a little modeling here and there, mostly for her sister's business. So this was like a perfect fit for her to go ahead and do. Even though she was like more of a tomboy and modeling was kind of a bit of a joke to her, she was still beautiful. And so obviously people gravitated towards her, and since she had the history in that, it made sense to ask her. Prior to leaving, Georgia said goodbye to her family, who told her she looked beautiful, and she told them that she didn't plan to be gone very long. That day, her family was having a barbecue, like her parents, extended family were all there having a barbecue, and so she said that she was going to be coming back soon. She didn't expect to be gone very long. She was going to come back and hang out and spend time with everyone, but then she just didn't come back. After several attempts to contact Georgia, and with her being missing for over 24 hours, her family was finally like, okay, we have to do something, and they went and they called the police. Police ended up heading over to the house of her friend, the budding photographer, and when they got there, the photographer and Georgia were not there. But they did find his camera. And though he tried to delete the files off of his camera, they were able to retrieve them. And once they saw those photos, they got a very gruesome picture into what happened to Georgia, and they knew that she was no longer alive. Now, before we get into that, let's first talk about who Georgia was. Georgia Williams was born in Shropshire, England, which I know you guys will let me know if I'm saying that correctly down below. I'm really not sure, but that looks right to me, which, by the way, my God, that place looks absolutely beautiful. And she was born on September 7th, 1995, and she was one of two daughters born to her father, Stephen, and her mother, Lynette. Georgia was actually born at like the perfect time in her family's lives. Like things were really moving up for them. She flew into the world after midnight, waiting for no one, and brightened up their days. Like they were so happy to have this little baby girl. And shortly after she was born, their family got even more good news because her father, Stephen, had been applying to be a police officer, and he got the job like right after she was born. So she was their little like lucky charm. Georgia and her family were very close. Her and her sister weren't that far apart in age, and they were more than just sisters. They were also friends. And Georgia was said to be like the jokester little sister. And Georgia's sister Scarlett said of her, quote, "Georgia is the best little sister you could ever wish for, although it's fair to say we can annoy each other on a daily basis. We are like chalk and cheese. We always joke that I am pink and she is blue because we are into such different things. As children, I was into ballet, while all she wanted to do was go off with the air cadets and do outdoor stuff. My dad rightly describes her as a gorgeous tomboy. She is a beautiful girl, but so much more comfortable covered in mud while dreaming of being in the RAF. She would do anything for anyone, and I'm going to do everything for her from now on. She is my little sister, but beyond that, she will always be my best friend too. Georgia was a shining star. She was said to be a role model that inspired her family, her friends, her community, and people all over the world. She got super good grades. She worked on her college's Build a Plane project. She was active in the local football club. She was head girl at Wood Technology College, a member of the student council at New College, a volunteer member of the Telford United Soccer's Club match day safety team. That was a mouthful. And she was a cadet in the Air Training Corps, becoming a corporal with plans to go on to become a Royal Air Force paramedic. Like, these were her dreams. This is what she was working towards. And I guess initially she actually wanted to join the RAF regiment, which I'm not super familiar with what that is, but either they did not or they still do not allow women to do what she wanted to do. So instead she decided to be a paramedic because she still wanted to be out on the front lines. Georgia was said to be a good daughter, a good friend, a good student, just like an overall good person. She was said to epitomize all that is good about young people. But she was also like, that's a high pedestal to be on, right? Because she was also just like a totally normal teenage girl doing totally normal teenage things. She loved being outside. She loved being active. Okay, like her friends gave her the nickname Ferret, which is absolutely adorable. She was lively and bubbly, and like she was the type of person that what you saw was what you got with her, and what you saw from her was happiness and sunshine and smiles. She was always laughing, and her smile was said to be infectious. She loved music and had a very, quote, eclectic music taste, according to her mom, liking artists from Michael Bublé to Pink to Queen, and she loved to watch local bands, some of which later helped raise money for the Georgia Williams Trust, something we'll talk about later that her family developed after she was murdered. Now, even though at the time she was killed, Georgia was in like the prime of her life. She was beautiful, she was smart, she was in college studying her A-levels, which I have no idea what that is, but I saw she was studying sports, psychology, and biology. She was also in a new relationship. About 6 weeks before she was killed, she had started dating this new guy. His name was Matt, and apparently like the two met on a bus. And generally, Georgia was very like level-headed, and like guys didn't really get to her like that. But for whatever reason, he made her happy, he made her giggly, he sent her roses, and her mom could tell that this was like something that was going to be good for her, or at least something that she was excited about pursuing. Which is really sad because, you know, she didn't get to see where that went. But like, it seemed things were really looking up for her, right? But I guess it hadn't always been that way. Georgia, when she was younger, went through like a good amount of bullying. Apparently it was pretty relentless. Like they really put her through the ringer, these bully dickheads. It was so bad that at one point she actually almost even switched schools. So because of her experience with people being so horrible to her, she learned to be very compassionate to other people. She learned that she never wanted anyone to go through what she went through. She never wanted to be the person who treated people like they were like the other people. She wanted everybody to be included and cared for, and that was something that she carried with her throughout her life. Fortunately, though, the bullying thing didn't last. Just so you know, in case you were curious, apparently by I'm saying apparently a lot. I'll look into a thesaurus if you guys want. But by high school, her bully had fucked right off, and Georgia was thriving, making friends, pretty popular, had like a blossoming social life. Everything was good. Georgia was also very responsible. Okay, she was the type of person that as soon as she was old enough to get a job, she did. She got a job at a local gas station, and this brought her, you know, extra money, some spending money, some independence, all the good things that a young lady gets from having a job. Georgia was super popular at work. She made a lot of friends at work, and not just friends that you hung out with, not like coworkers you just hung out with at work, but people she hung out with outside of work. And one of these people she spent a good amount of time with outside of work was a man named Jamie Reynolds. Apparently, Jamie had worked at the gas station for a while, and he wasn't super popular amongst his coworkers. He was kind of the outcast amongst the group. So once Georgia was there and started hanging out with everybody, she started to invite Jamie along because she didn't want anyone to feel like they were the person being left out, like they were other than everyone else, like they were less than anyone else. So she would go out of her way to make sure he felt included, and she had seen him before. He wasn't like a complete stranger to her because they lived nearby, they grew up in the same area. He lived only a short walk away from George's family's house. Now, Jamie Reynolds. Jamie Reynolds was 23 years old, so he was a bit older than Georgia, who was 17. And Jamie had actually been in the same class as Georgia's older sister, Scarlett, if I remember correctly. But despite the age difference, Jamie developed a bit of a crush on Georgia from the time that they worked together and the time that they were friends and hung out together. He developed a little bit of a crush, and he was not quiet about this crush. He made it very, very known that he was interested. He asked her out. He would ask her to go and do things. He would ask her on dates. He'd be like, you want to go to the movies with me? Would you like to go and see The Fast and the Furious with me, Georgia? But she was not receptive. She was like, I'm not interested. I like you. I just don't like you. She told him, like, the feelings just aren't there. I just want to be friends. And they did continue being friends. And then during that time, she, started dating Matt. So it was definitely off the table. But this didn't stop Jamie from continuing to ask her out anyway. He wrote to her and about her several times on Facebook. He asked her out over and over. He tried to kiss her. He even wrote online that he did kiss her. I didn't see if this ever actually did happen, but that's what he wrote. He was clearly infatuated, and he was clearly frustrated, right, that Georgia was not with him, and then more frustrated that she got with somebody else while they were friends, because when Georgia started dating her boyfriend, he posted on Facebook, quote, "Whenever I arrange dates, they either never happen or the girl magically gains a boyfriend. And it's worse when you actually like someone. You're stuck. Happy they're fucking happy, but unhappy because it's not you." He said he was cursed and forever alone, blah, 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 blah. Despite this, though, the two were still friends. They still hung out. Like, when the group of friends, coworkers went out together, they would both go. They would hang out. There were photos of them together. They got along. It didn't seem like there was any bad blood. They still talked. So, like, Jamie confided in her. He opened up to her. He was like, hey, I want to get out of this Dust Bowl town. I don't want to just work at this gas station forever. I've worked here so long. This isn't my dream. What I really want to do is be a photographer. So when he asked her if she wouldn't mind doing some modeling for him so that he could build up a portfolio, she was like, absolutely, I will. You're my friend. I would love to help you. I mean, she did have wannabe model on her Facebook page as a joke between her and her sister because of the modeling she did for her sister's business. Some business. I actually didn't look up what the business was, but because of that, she was like, absolutely, I will. And she was one of a few girls that he planned to photograph for this portfolio. So the plan was made. May 26, 2013, Georgia and some of her friends were going to go over to Jamie's mom's house so that they could take part in this photo shoot. On that day, Georgia's family was having a barbecue. It was her parents, her sister, even some of her extended family, and they didn't want her to go. They actually asked her if she would, like, please cancel, just stay and hang out with family. And I think she thought about it a little bit, but she was like, no, I've made a commitment. I need to honor that commitment. So she got herself all dolled up. She looked really pretty, and she was going to head out the door. She said goodbye. Said, don't worry, I'm not going to be gone very long. It was just a 5-minute drive up the road. It was about 7:30 p.m. when she walked out the door. But as the hours passed and Georgia didn't return, her family got a little bit worried. They weren't worried about Jamie per se because they had met him before and they never got any weird vibes from him. They'd met him when, they went into Georgia's work and, like, he lived in the neighborhood. They knew they were friends and they knew everything was fine. But it was weird for her not to come home, right? She was reliable, she was punctual, and she would at least let them know if she wasn't going to come home. So they were like, that's kind of weird. So her mom actually texted her and was just like, hey, like, when are you coming home? Her mother received a response saying that the photo shoot was over, but her and her friends were having fun together, so they decided they wanted to continue hanging out afterwards. She said something along the lines of, like, I don't know how long I'm going to be out, so don't wait up for me. And she signed off this message with 3 kisses like she always did. Remember this for later because it does matter. The next morning, on Monday, her parents woke up at 6 a.m. and her mother, once getting up, decided to go into George's room, see if everything was cool, doing mom things like moms do. And when she went in there, she saw that George's bed had not been slept in. And this was weird to her because she said she was going to come home and she hadn't gotten a text from her daughter saying she wasn't going to come home. So that seemed odd. So she texted Georgia and she didn't get a response back right away, which I don't think would have been too weird because, like, I don't see very many 17-year-olds opting to wake up at 6 a.m. when they don't have to, right? So a couple hours later, she gets a text back and it just says, like, hey, I'm sorry. It got late and I decided to stay with a friend. I'm sorry I didn't text, but, my phone is going to die. So if you don't hear from me again, that's why. Don't worry, all is good. Now, in hindsight, this did seem a little weird because her family knew that, like, she would have texted. She was the type who would have texted if she wasn't coming home. And she was also the type of person to always have her phone charged. She wasn't one to let her phone die. But at the time, I can see them rationalizing it like, things happen. Maybe this friend doesn't have the same kind of phone as her, so she doesn't have her charger. Whatever, everything's fine. So the day after the photo shoot was Monday the 27th, and Georgia had plans to go to a music festival with her boyfriend Matt. So because of this, when Georgia didn't come home at all that day, it wasn't weird because they assumed that she was at this music festival with her boyfriend, and were like, hey, she's not texting because she didn't stop home, she didn't get her charger, she didn't charge her phone, so she's just out having fun. But then Georgia didn't come home that night either. And when the next morning she wasn't home, they knew something was wrong because that Tuesday, Georgia actually had her first driving lesson. And this was not something she would miss, so they were like, okay, something is off here. Her family calls around, and they find that Georgia didn't go to the music festival. So now she hasn't gone to the music festival. She hasn't shown up for her driving lesson. It's been another full day. It's now Tuesday morning, and she's missing. Her family's calling all of her friends to see, who she stayed with, because she was supposedly staying with a friend, and that's why she wasn't here. And they find that no one has seen or heard from Georgia since, the day of the photo shoot. And her phone's going straight to voicemail. So it was quickly determined that something was wrong, that Georgia was definitely missing. So her parents went and reported her missing. And her friends started looking for her right away. Everyone was doing everything they could to try to track her down. Her boyfriend started posting on social media that, he would never give up looking for her, and he was going to be the person that found her. And then he said specifically to her, quote, "I love you so much, Georgia Williams. You mean the world to me. Please just come back or get in touch with us. I need you, and I miss you so much." Even the police spoke to Georgia directly through the media, saying, please come home. Please just call home. You're not in trouble. We just need to know that you're safe. So police are involved now and they're searching. So of course the first place they want to go is to Jamie's house because hello, that is the last place she was seen. And I can only imagine once they looked up his name, once they started looking into Jamie and his past, how uncertain they felt with how the outcome of this situation was going to be. They had to know in their souls that something bad had happened here. Because what we'll find out is Jamie had a pretty sordid past, something that would definitely make you uncomfortable, something that Georgia, I'm sure, didn't know about, and something that her family definitely didn't know about. But that's something we're going to get into in just a little bit. Police go to his house, and they find that not only is Georgia missing, but Jamie is as well. He had straight up skipped work and just dipped. He told friends that he was going on a camping trip. He even told Georgia's sister that he was going on this camping trip when she had called him, being like, hey, my sister's missing. You were with her. Have you seen her? He was like, oh, no, I haven't. And I can't help look. I hope you find her, though. But, I'm gonna go. I have to go camping. So he loaded up the family van with something, and he took off. Meanwhile, Georgia's friends and family are looking for her everywhere, and they're, hanging up missing persons posters, just completely frantic, wondering where she is. A bunch of her friends had got together at a local church to lean on each other for support and also to bring attention to Georgia's disappearance. And there they had a book of support so that people could sign it and leave messages for either Georgia or her family. They handed out pictures of Georgia, they put up posters of her at local stores, and they tied pink ribbons to trees. So they searched Jamie's family's house. The two weren't there. They went to the gas station where they both worked. The two weren't there. They even contacted Jamie's parents, who were on vacation in Italy at the time. So they were like, listen, I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him. I haven't talked to him. I don't know anything about this, which isn't super helpful. But they were able to give police a description of the van he had been driving, and I think the license plate too. All that jazz. So that was helpful. With that information, a bolo of sorts, a UK bolo, was issued so that people could be on the lookout, because at this point it's been days and he's in a vehicle. He could literally be anywhere. Fortunately, though, it actually didn't take long to hunt Jamie down, because his van was seen on CCTV footage after his license plate was run through the plate recognition system, which is absolutely crazy. That blows my mind. We are being watched at all times. It's kind of frightening, but also helpful in this situation. And so he was found, and he was found at a Premier Inn hotel, and this was in Glasgow, Scotland, which was about 300 miles away. So he was arrested and his van was searched, which was parked at a nearby parking lot, which he had been seen. This doesn't matter, but he had been seen on CCTV footage there as well, changing and stuff by the van. So they were able to find the van, they were able to search the van, etc. He ended up being taken in by Glasgow police, and he was questioned about Georgia's disappearance. And when asked what happened, he said he had no idea. He didn't know where she was. He didn't know what could have happened to her, but they didn't really believe him. So they actually arrested him for kidnapping, and they transported him the hours back to Shropshire, where he could be questioned by them as well. And when questioned by them, he was like, listen, I have no idea where Georgia is. He said he had no idea, nothing to do with her disappearance. Now, initially, police were operating under the assumption that she might have just been kidnapped, right? That he had just taken her, but that she was okay. But they were going to find out quickly that that wasn't the case, because even though they weren't at his home, police were still searching his home. Well, not even his home, it was his family's home. Okay, so he lived with his mom, Kay, who was a teacher, his stepdad, Sean, who was an electrician, and his little sister, whose name was Brogan, which is a name I've never heard of before, but I kind of like it. My brain shut off. But I wanted to tell you a side note, so I'm going to turn it back on. Side note. Jamie's family lived so close to George's family that when police rushed over to his house to search it, her family could see it. They watched the cars, the cop cars, like speeding by, rushing to Jamie's house to search it, and all they could do was sit by and watch and hope that they found something. And they did. They found something horrifying. They found a camera, and you remember George was going over there to do a photo shoot, so obviously this camera is something they wanted to look at. But when they went into it, they saw that all the files had been erased. So the memory card was removed, it was taken to the station, right? And there they were able to retrieve those files. What they found on this card were photos of Georgia. In the first photos, she was dressed differently. She wasn't wearing the clothes that she had left the house in. So she had left the house wearing a white top, black skinny jeans, black like flats, and a black leather jacket. But in the photos, she was wearing a new outfit, and apparently this is an outfit that Jamie gave her, and it involved stilettos and little leather shorts. And in these photos, she is standing on a box with a noose around her neck. But she is looking into the camera and she is smiling. Because it turns out that Jamie had told her that he wanted to do an artistic photo shoot where it would look like she was just floating in air by the noose, because he was going to edit out the box later. Through the series of photos, you could see what happened. Georgia was standing on that box, smiling, taking the photos, thinking she was helping this man with a photography project, when he kicked the box out from under her and let her hang. She died by hanging, dude. It's horrifying. And he stood there and took photos of her through the whole process until she died. He then took her by the noose and dragged her around his house and took photos of her in all different places in the house, in all different positions, all different poses, before he raped her body in different locations in the house several different times. One of the times was in his mother and stepfather's bed, all the while taking photos of the whole action. And then he took her jewelry as a souvenir after killing her. And what's super fucked up is that sounds horrible in itself, but apparently there was even more that they didn't release because of the untold distress it would cause to the public to know this information. He literally did all of this in his mother's home while they were on vacation. I cannot with this guy, dude. Like, what the fuck? Inside his home, they also found journals that Jamie had written. And in these journals, there were stories that Jamie had written about torturing, raping, and murdering women. And there were like 40 stories, dude. And one of these stories was about Georgia, and it was called Georgia Williams in Surprise. And it described exactly what he did to her, how he imagined her body dancing as she died by hanging. And in his story, he said specifically, quote, "I can't wait to see you dance for me. I like my girls dead. That was a quality show, babe." And this story was written prior to Georgia's death, right? And inside this journal, he also wrote Georgia's passcode for her phone and wrote a note for himself to remember to sign off her texts with 3 kisses. Okay, so he clearly planned this. I mean, he even went as far as building like a hanging mechanism in his family's loft. In addition to these journals and the photos, they also went and looked into his computer history, and I'm sure you can imagine that it was just as disgusting as he is. They found like 18,000 images and videos of super violent porn, rape, torture, actual snuff films, like dark shit. And they also found his personal photos. These were photos of girls and women that he knew in person, that he had printed out and then altered. He had taken these photos of girls that he knew and he drew them being tortured, and he drew nooses around their neck. Like, he made his own art from girls that he knew. And we'll find out right now that this wasn't new for him. He had a fixation on this for a while, and the police knew it, dude. It makes me absolutely crazy. This is where we're going to collectively get angry. I'm going to tell you now, because it's maddening. It's maddening, and it's so frustrating, and it's just discouraging is what it is. That people aren't being protected how they should be, and then things like this happen. So let's get into it. So, years before George's murder, in 2008, when Jamie was just 17 years old, It looks like he tried to kill a girl. Okay, apparently he invited this girl over. She was either 16 or 17. Different reporting say different age, but teenage girl invites her over under the pretense of working on a project. She gets there and he's like trying to get her to go to his room. And she's like, I think I'm going to pass on that. I'm not super interested in going into your room. And in response to this, he straight up tries to strangle this girl. He starts strangling her. She freaks out. She fights back. She bites him. She like hits him in the ribs and she escapes, runs out the door, goes to police and reports this. So you would think he gets arrested, right? But you would be wrong. He instead gets evaluated by like mental health services, which is great because that should happen. That should always happen, right? Well, I don't know about always, but that should happen. But that shouldn't be the only thing that happens. Apparently after this, Jamie had regular contact with the youth offenders team and the mental health services. And the mental health workers believed that Jamie was a significant risk to others because he had gone from viewing violent images to actually harming people. At that time, they learned from Jamie's mother that he had some dark tendencies, dark interests, dark thoughts. He was obsessed with violent porn and snuff films where women were being strangled, suffocated, and raped. He was also a bit of an artist then, but not a good one. He would take photos of women, girls he knew, girls he didn't know, girls in like schoolgirl uniforms, and he would draw them being tortured, draw them being killed, draw them with nooses around their necks. He even had a drawing like this of the girl he tried to strangle. So he had all these photos of local girls that he had drawn like this, right? And one of the girls that he had drawn like this, he tried to strangle. None of these girls were contacted. None of them were warned that this had happened. None of them were told like, hey, since we're not arresting him, you might want to avoid him because he's crazy. They just said nothing. And apparently one of the girls in these images was actually a friend of Georgia's older sister, Scarlett. Her name was Jadine, and she was one of the girls that he drew like this. And she said of this quote, he had put a red noose around my neck, bulging eyes, bright lipstick on the lips. I was stunned. I could not believe it. I was disgusted. I didn't know how I felt. I froze, really. I just kept thinking, what if it was me? What if he killed me? She was super vocal after Georgia was killed too, saying that like by not telling the girls and giving Jamie too many chances, they were putting his rights above public safety. And she also said that if she had been told back in 2008 that Jamie had drawn these photos of her and was such a creep and had done the things that he did, that she would have told Georgia to avoid him like the plague. And Jamie was clearly not okay, not somebody you wanted to be around, dude. He told a therapist at that time that he found the images of strangulation arousing and that he had practiced asphyxiation. He had experimented with asphyxiation with a bag on himself. And this is all at 17 years old. So he strangles a girl. He tells his therapist that violent porn really turns him on. He says snuff films super do it for him. He's put on medication for his depression, and the cops do nothing. They consider the situation resolved and do nothing. Officers just decided that he had committed assault that resulted in actual harm and issued him a, quote, final warning, and his case was closed in 2010, which meant he would no longer be evaluated, watched, nothing. So that's bad, right? But wait, there's more. He was out, but he was not done. 2 years before Georgia was killed in 2011, Jamie had a crush on one of his coworkers, okay? But she had rejected his advances. She wasn't interested. Sound familiar? Yes, it does. So in response to this, he backed his car into her car, slammed his car into her car. So the cops are called, of course, and they looked into the incident, but they didn't look into Jamie's background and see that he had a history of violence against women. They just logged it as like a simple traffic accident. And man, it honestly should have been looked into. Like, I feel like oftentimes when there's traffic accidents, you do look into people. I'm not a cop, I don't know, but they should have looked into him, dude, because he was a violent guy. And the woman that he slammed his car into, this was a woman that he had taken and drawn photos of with nooses around her neck. And you remember those fucked up stories he wrote, like the one that he wrote about Georgia, about killing her? He had a story written for this woman as well. And I hate to say it, but we're not done yet. In 2013, just months before Georgia was killed, Jamie lured another teenage girl to his house. I believe his family was away at this point too. I don't know where they were. It doesn't matter. He was there. He lures a teenage girl to his house. Once she's inside, he locks all the doors, locks her in, so she can't leave, and then tries to convince her to spend the night. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she was so uncomfortable. She was so scared that she started screaming. She started freaking out. She's like, if you don't let me out of this house, I'm going to bust out a window, bro. And apparently he was like, oh, just calm down, probably because she's screaming and people are going to hear her. And he's like, I just have to find the keys to let you out. But he had the keys and he was lying. But luckily for this girl, he did let her out and he did let her go. So this is the guy who Georgia was last seen with. This is the guy who's denying any involvement. But this is the guy who was a dumbass and took photos of what he did that police were going to find. The morning after Jamie was arrested at 5:30, the police headed over to Georgia's family's house to give them the news that he had been arrested and Georgia was still missing. And her family was in hysterics, dude. Her mom fucking lost it. Just kept telling them over and over not to say that and telling them to get out of her house. She thought that if they weren't there, that somehow it just wouldn't be true. And then her father vomited in hearing this news from his colleagues. He was just like, he knew that Jamie had killed her. He kept saying it over and over that he had killed her. He said he felt it in his bones. But the day that he actually found out she was dead, he said that's the day that he died. And you may have caught there that I said his two colleagues, because remember, he is a cop. Georgia's dad's a cop, and he actually works for the same unit that is investigating his daughter's murder. He actually worked for the same unit that investigated Jamie in the 2008 offense where he tried to strangle that girl. I don't think he actually worked on that case. He was in the unit, but he wasn't the one handling it. But it's just so wild, dude. Anyways, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Jamie was arrested and he was charged with Georgia's murder. But he refused to tell them where her body was. Despite the fact that they had the photos, he was like, listen, she was fine. I did not kill her. We did the photo shoot. She left with some friends and I haven't seen her since. So because he wasn't being particularly helpful, police had to piece together a timeline of events from the time that Georgia got to his house to the moment he was arrested in Scotland. They were able to determine that the day after Georgia went missing, Jamie had gone and he filled up his van with gas and then he headed to Wrexham, which is in Wales. And while there, he stopped at a movie theater. He went in and he saw a movie, dude. He went in and he saw Fast and Furious. And based on the year, I believe it was Fast and Furious 6. And you may recall, he asked Georgia to go to this movie with him. So now he's going alone while she lay dead in his van. It is so fucked up. But that's pretty much all they knew, so there was a lot of unaccounted for time and unaccounted for miles between his home, the movie theater, and Scotland where he was eventually arrested, so police needed help. They went on BBC's Crime Watch and they asked the public. They were like, hey, we need your help. Did you see him? Did you see his van? Did you see anything that could possibly help us find Georgia and bring her home? Even the littlest thing could help. So please, holla at your boys. They didn't say that. I said that. Turns out this was a really good move because apparently a lot of people had seen Jamie during that time. Several people had actually helped him when his van got stuck on the side of the road, in the mud. I guess a bunch of people helped him to get out of the mud, and one person even took a photo of all these people trying to help this guy get out of the mud, right? So police are like, we should probably go to that location that all these people saw him at, because why would he be pulled off in a wooded area stuck in the mud 50 miles away from home with a missing girl? 5 days after she went missing, Georgia's body was recovered. She was found nude and barely concealed, lying in a stream near the Nanty Garth path. And this is an area where later bouquets of flowers were laid in the street. Georgia's parents, Steve and Lynette, were some of the people who left the flowers. They said that as they headed to that area, they somehow hated him more. The way that he treated her body after death made them hate him even more, because she was just laying out there outside naked with police all over her. You know what I mean? They called it utterly callous. Lynette said before going to the area herself, she would have nightmares about the woods. She would picture it dark and picture bugs crawling everywhere. And it was incredibly difficult for her to picture her daughter in that place. But then the day that they actually went there, she found a little bit of relief because she said it was a warm and sunny day. And when they got there, they were like, this is the type of place that Georgia would have gone to camp with her friends. Anyways, Georgia's body was taken back so that she could be identified by her mother and father. And I guess when they went, they actually brought Scarlett with them so that as a family, they could all go and say their goodbyes. But her parents went in first. And when they saw her, she was so badly decomposed. And because, she had been out in the elements for so long. And her father said that he saw, this broke my heart, but no peace on her face. Oh God, that just fucks me up. I'm sorry. That he saw no peace on her face. So he didn't let Scarlett come in. He didn't let anyone view George's body except for him and his wife because they wanted to spare anyone else who loved her that final image of her in their minds. Now, even though George's parents had identified her, her identity was officially confirmed or legally confirmed 4 days later by dental records. They were able to determine by her autopsy that her cause of death was strangulation by a ligature, which is something we knew, and her manner of death was homicide, which is obvious. On June 12, 2013, George's funeral took place at All Saints Church in Wellington, and a group of motorcycles led the funeral procession down a route that was lined in orange and turquoise bows that her family had put out the night before. Her mother said that they went all out for the funeral because this was basically going to be like the last thing they got to do for her. She wasn't going to get to help her daughter plan a wedding. She wasn't going to get to help her daughter plan a wedding. She wasn't going to get to help with a christening. So this was like the last good thing she could do for her. Nearly 1,000 people attended her funeral, and George's friends and her fellow cadets at like the Air Corps, remember? They did the Guard of Honor, which I didn't know what that was, so I looked into it. And apparently it's where they like help people to their seats, and they also accompany the casket when it's brought in. And basically this is something that's generally done at like a military funeral. So Jamie's arrested, and now we just have to go through the court system. And it seemed to happen pretty fast. I don't know if it's always fast over there or if this case was just particularly fast. But in October of 2013, so the same year, Jamie entered his plea, and he entered a plea of not guilty. Jamie was silent with his head bowed as the prosecution described how he had groomed and manipulated Georgia to get her to be his friend and then get her to come to his house so that he could, do these sick things that he had wanted to do forever. They said that Jamie told her that they were going to be simulating hanging so that it could be artistic and she could be floating, but the entire time he knew what he was going to do to her. They told the court how in these initial photos she's standing there on the box with the noose around her neck and she's looking into the camera and she is smiling. And that is so chilling to me. I did not look up to see if that photo's online. I really hope it's not because it's just horrifying. And they added that like this death by hanging takes a while. It's not like she fell so fast, so like far that it would break her neck, like in, hangings back in the day, which were also barbaric, but this would have taken a while. So he had to stand there and watch her die. And not only did he stand there and watch her die, he stood there and he took photos of it happening. And then once she was dead, he did all he did to her, and then did everything he could to cover his tracks, even pretending to be Georgia and texting her own mother to buy time. Anyway, he pled not guilty, so now we just had to wait for the trial to start, and it was scheduled for 2 months later. And then in December of 2013, the day his trial was set to begin, he actually shocked George's family by pleading guilty to George's murder. He spoke through his attorney and gave a statement where he basically said he wanted to protect George's family from future trauma by not putting them through a full trial. A few weeks after this, it was his sentencing hearing, and apparently during the sentencing hearing, he really pretended to be sad, to be remorseful, but I guess George's father had seen him. Like, he could see him right before he walked in the courtroom, and he was smiling, he was joking, he was fine, but then as soon as he, crossed that threshold, he got scared and timid, made himself small. George's father gave a victim impact statement where he said that words like crushed and devastated are often used to describe what they're going through, but that words have not been invented to describe how horrible it feels to lose a child. He said that his family is damned by evil to endure the sorrow and misery for the rest of their lives, and said that they just constantly cry. He said that his family was destroyed, and then said of his daughter's murder, quote, "Evil took Georgia away from her family and numerous people that loved her. We all lost a truly wonderful person on that evening. We exist, but that's all it is. It's not life anymore." Now, after looking at Jamie's previous crimes and the assessment that was given to him where it was determined that he was quite literally or figuratively a serious threat, the judge decided to give Jamie the harshest punishment that he could legally give him. And this is because the judge believed that Jamie was a budding serial killer. And this is because a psychiatrist had testified to this, saying this guy will become a serial killer. So he gave him a life sentence, or something that's called a whole life order, which I believe means that he can never get out. The judge said to Jamie, quote, "Georgia would not have died instantly, but would have suffered horribly, both mentally and physically, knowing she had been betrayed by someone whom she had trusted and into whose power she had given herself. Killing Georgia was an expression of a long-standing, recurrent preoccupation with violent, sadistic pornography. You enjoyed the spectacle of her final, ghastly minutes as she struggled for life, knowing she was facing death. Jamie was one of the youngest people in British criminal history to get a sentence this harsh, like a sentence that long. Other people who you may know who have gotten a sentence that long were Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, you know, the fucking pieces of shit, disgusting baby killers. Rose West, who was a serial killer, and a man named Mark Bridger, who I actually haven't heard of before, but I looked into him a little bit, and he apparently killed a 5-year-old girl named April Jones, and that's as far as I looked into it because I'm really not in the business about reading about a dead child today, I gotta be honest. And Jamie, last I checked, was being held at the Wakefield High Security Jail, which is charmingly referred to as Monster Mansion. George's family has said that they are not satisfied, that there was no sentence that would satisfy them, no length of sentence will satisfy them because their daughter is still dead. They were like, you can take everything from Jamie, but he still has the one thing Georgia doesn't, and that is life. Her mother added, quote, "We still have nightmares. One of us will wake the other up at night screaming. We help each other through them. I relive the day as soon as I wake up or when I try to sleep. I feel drained most of the time. It's on my mind constantly. It never goes away." And her father added, quote, "Physical pain I can stand, but I've never known mental pain like this. It's torture. Years of torture." Jamie did try to appeal his conviction in 2014, and people were pissed, dude. A petition was started up like against it, and 7,000 people signed it. They were just like, don't let this dick out. Like, there's no reason to do so. And basically, Jamie's attorney was saying that the whole life order was excessive, that him being in there with no possibility to ever be released was excessive because he was so young and because he had done the right thing by pleading guilty and making sure that George's family didn't have to go through a trial. But the appeals court was like, nah, that's going to be a no from me, dog. And they said that there was no reason, like they had not proven that there was any reason that the whole life order was inappropriate, basically because of what he had done and who he was, quite frankly. In 2017, I did see that his attorney said that they were going to be appealing again to the European Court of Human Rights, but I haven't seen anything since 2017 on this. I looked up and I didn't find anything that showed that anything had happened, which good, because I don't think this guy should get out, because this guy's a fucking piece of human gar. He's an amoeba on a flea on a mouse. He sucks. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, the aftermath of this was intense because people were very upset that this violent man even had the opportunity to get to Georgia, right? It was clear he should have been handled sooner. Professionals had determined he was a significant risk. He had all these photos of all these girls. None of them were worn. There was a big problem. So an investigation was put into place. They looked into this. They looked into Jamie's case to see where the ball was dropped, and they found that the ball was majorly dropped by many people, and that Georgia would still be alive today if people had done their jobs. The investigation concluded that at least 8 agencies were listed as handling Jamie's first attacks, which included the police department, mental health services, and children and family services, and they had failed to communicate with one another and work together. And the, quote, "confused and uncoordinated approach to the case meant that there was an element of misinformation operating between the agencies," end quote. Because of this, the police believed that the case had been suitably resolved, even though, quote, "in retrospect, it is clear that had this matter been looked into in more detail, it would have highlighted Reynolds' ongoing and developing behavior and the need for serious concerns about the risks that he posed." George's parents cried when they read the disastrous approach that the police took to the situation, and her father said that the officers who failed his daughter should not be able to sleep at night. And then he said, quote, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making. George's death could have been prevented." As a result of the inquiry, several officers from the West Mercer Police Department were served with notices of misconduct for both the 2008 incident and the 2011 incident, where he tried to strangle the 16 or 17-year-old girl and tried to, slam his car into that woman's car. Well, he succeeded in slamming his car into that woman's car. George's parents said that these notices of misconduct were menial. Is that the word? I think so. They said that basically this was the equivalent of some school kids being told no, no, no by a principal. And as a result of this, after this came out, George's father actually quit the police force. He said that he had lost confidence in the police and that it was wearing him down. And then he added, quote, We have witnessed a system that is lenient beyond belief, that does not take into account the tragic consequences of Georgia's murder. Georgia's mother straight up said their inaction caused Georgia's death. She said specifically of this quote, "They killed Georgia by not doing anything properly, and they should accept some consequences for that." The police chief did apologize to Georgia's family and said that since this has happened, they have made a bunch of changes into how cases like this have been handled. And the director of children and family services did actually admit fault and said that they had like a list of reforms that were being made as a result of this happening. Now, Georgia's remembered in many ways. Her local community banded together to raise money to put up a bench in her honor. Her mother also wrote a book about her called Our Georgia. It was written 10 years after Georgia's murder so that people could read about her and remember her. Her parents also set up something called the Georgia Williams Foundation, and this helps young people pursue their passions and their dreams, and they, support them with financial help. They said that they wanted other people to be able to do all the things that Georgia did, to go out, fly a plane, canoe down a river. They wanted to use the fund to get that spirit going and keep it going. The aim of the trust is to generate funds and activities to enable young people to participate in life-building skills. The trust funds music and outdoor adventures for young people, and her mother said that she loves giving out this money because she feels like it's kind of Georgia doing it, Georgia giving it to people, telling them to go out, experience life, have fun, do what's good for yourself. Her family has also done what they can to help meet with people in power, to help make changes within the police department specifically. They met with Justice Secretary Chris Grayling to discuss how police dealt with Jamie Reynolds when he attacked years before he killed Georgia. They informed the justice that police standards need to be stuck to at all times, and the victim needs to be given more support than the perpetrator. They also said that the punishments for things like this need to be more severe. Georgia's mother, Lynette, said of this quote, "Incidents are still occurring where people are in the court time and time again for serious cases, but are allowed to reoffend far too easily and quickly through lack of time in prison and the lack of supervision when released. The balance needs redressing in favor of the victims." Her family has also spoken out against the release of other violent murderers, like Colin Pitchfork, for example. So Colin Pitchfork was in jail for life for murdering two 15-year-old children, Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth. And it's crazy that they were talking, that they spoke out about his release specifically, because we just talked about his release. Or we haven't talked about it yet because I haven't finished editing those videos. I haven't posted them yet, but at the time you're watching this, it's already posted. But in my video series on Mandy Stavik, we talked about the fact that the detective in that case was inspired to do a DNA sweep based on the book called The Blooding, and the book called The Blooding was written about the crimes committed by Colin Pitchfork. And now, in this case, Georgia's parents are speaking out about the possible release of this guy. It's just wild. Life's crazy. Anyways, Colin Pitchfork was set to be released by the parole board, or because of the parole board reconsideration mechanism. And Georgia's parents came out and they were like, this is just total bullshit. And it's an insult to these two young girls who he murdered. They said of this quote, "The impact of losing a child is devastating to all parents. This is compounded when, as parents, you know that the last minutes of your loved one is spent in terror. These monsters who commit these atrocities destroy more than one life. They destroy whole families." They added, quote, "The public interest is not served by releasing such people back into our communities. Criminals are in prison to keep the streets safe, as well as to serve the purpose of punishment. Whole life orders must apply to criminals in such horrific cases." For the record, Colin Pitchfork was released in September of 2021, but he ended up going back to prison a short 2 months later because he breached his conditions of being released by, quote, "approaching young women while on walks." After he was sent back to jail, Dawn Ashworth's mother, her name was Barbara, she told BBC that this is great. It's great that he's back because now women and girls who are out on the street can feel safe knowing that this guy's back behind bars and can't hurt them like he hurt her daughter. Now, as far as Georgia's family goes, I have read that they have moved out of their family home. They moved to a new place for a new fresh start, and they became grandparents, calling their grandson a burst of sunshine that their family needs and deserves. Georgia's mother, Lynette, said that Georgia would have been an incredible aunt, and then added that she hopes that her new baby grandson has just a little bit of the spirit that his auntie had. And with that said, that, my friends, is the story of the horrifying murder of 17-year-old Georgia Williams. I hope that this video was informative and made sense. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Georgia with me today. Now, considering everything I told you about this case, I want to revisit the question of the day. I actually have two now. I have the original question and I have another one that's kind of kicked around in my brain since going through all these details. And the first one is this: what do you think should have been done to prevent something like this happen? Like, what should have been the repercussion for what Jamie did when he was a child? Like, he was technically underage, he was 17. So what should have been done when he first strangled that girl? And the second question is, I don't know if you caught, but the judge had said that they believed that Jamie's interest in violent porn played a part into what he did. And I just want to know what you think about that. I feel like there are conflicting theories on whether or not that contributes to things like this. So I want to know what your thoughts are on that. Like, do you think that did play a factor here? Do you think that does play a factor? Like, do you think it's something that just plays a factor in people that are already violent? Like, why do you think this happens? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a suggestion down in the comment section of what case you'd like to see me cover in the future. I have a long list of cases, but whenever you leave me a suggestion, I put your case on the list and your name next to it, so if I cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage, and I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week and I'd love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership where you get early access to non-sponsored videos, priority comment responses, things like that. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.